I cannot rid myself of doubts that the course to war we are now embarked upon was actually decided on many months ago, primarily in Washington, and we've seen a fairly remorseless unfolding of events since that time. I am not alone in having heard and met American politicians of great distinction who gave the impression that long ago a change of regime in Iraq was determined upon and that the use of military force in a preemptory strike was justified in order to achieve that. The motives, in most cases, I think were worthy. I don't believe the conspiracy theorists. I think they genuinely believe they're ridding themselves of an evil regime, and indeed you can go on to hear theories about the installation of democracy in the Arab world and so on, and it's all coupled with unfinished business from a previous administration and a reaction to the quite understandable state of political opinion in the United States of America in the aftermath of the 11th September. If we are to see warfare in the next few weeks, which I think is a very real possibility, I think this House has to ask itself, is there legitimacy in the doubt that possibly this was all decided on and has been remorselessly unfolding for many months? I think many people think it has. Indeed, I think that's why Middle England, that's why a lot of very moderate political opinion in this country has so much doubts. To many of my constituents, it's as obvious as asking the question, does the Emperor have clothes? When you ask them, was this war actually determined upon by Washington many months ago, and could the present American administration go on and seek re-election if no war in the event takes place and no removal of the presidency takes place? And that is a formidable case which the government have to respond to. Now, having said that, I give praise to the government for the steps they took when, firstly, they put themselves in the classic Churchillian position, followed by everybody's government, of being America's closest ally in this great diplomatic crisis in order to get the maximum possible influence over the way in which that power was exercised. That is what any Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary of this country would, I trust, have done. The next thing they did was to go to the United Nations. I won't give way again. They go to the United Nations and actually take it towards that path of diplomacy and peaceful coercion, which I trust the whole of this House would actually prefer if it could achieve the desired effect. And we had 1441, which I voted for, which was plainly paving the way to war if necessary and setting out the conditions upon which we'd endeavour to put together an international coalition which would enforce the will of the United Nations when all other steps have been exhausted. That actually turns on this whole question of whether there's a material breach. You can't brush aside the other concerns of members, but the revolting nature of the Iraqi regime and its cruelty is not a legal basis for warfare, much though we all deplore it. We've had all sorts of other things brought in. What we're concentrating on is, are there weapons of mass destruction, and can disarmament be induced, and if not, will force be used to enforce it? And that is the question not yet asked. The government does keep bringing in all kinds of other things to try to strengthen its claim. Even today, the Prime Minister was asking us to listen to the member for Kunun Valley, which I certainly will do with, no doubt, a sense of shock and sharing her concern about the outrageous behaviour of the Iraqi regime. We've suddenly got the word attitude being used today as well, as though the attitude of the Iraqi regime towards disarmament is a sudden new and exciting concept to bring in. The real question is there a material breach, which to me means, is there demonstrable evidence that weapons of biological and chemical nature are held in such condition and in such circumstances that they pose a threat now to neighbours or to us? I don't believe there's any evidence of links with Al-Qaeda. I don't believe they pose a threat to New York or to London. I think that's an insult to our intelligence. I do wish to know whether there are demonstrable evidence of sufficient quantities that pose a threat. I have doubts about that. This country, Iraq's army, I'm glad to say, I think is in a degraded and weaker position than it was in 1991. I don't believe Saddam Hussein. He probably has got material he's not disclosed around Iraq, and we need to pursue that rigorously. But is it in a condition where it's the moment capable of being deployed to be a threat to anybody? That, I think, has not yet been demonstrated, and I don't think we should go to war until it has. What has been achieved so far by use of threat, by going back to those policies of international diplomacy and deterrence that we used in the Cold War, has been quite successful. We have seen Saddam move by coercion, as every speaker so far has conceded. Well, that shows the present policy is working. It doesn't mean you have got to the stage where you now abandon deterrence, you abandon coercion, you abandon the threat and decide, well, unfortunately the weather's getting warmer in Iraq, we've got 250,000 people there, we've got a large proportion of the British Army, we've either got to bring them home in the next few weeks, or they've got to open fire. That is the situation we face. The war will be won quite easily when it takes place. I will only state that shortly as I'm running out of time. But I'm glad to say that if we do go to war, I don't think it will take very long. I do think we should consider alternatives because of the other consequences of war. How many terrorists will we recruit in the far more and long-standing battle against international terrorism, which is going to be far harder to win? And what have we done to the stability of Saudi Arabia, of Pakistan, of Egypt? What kind of leadership is going to replace the leadership that we are deposing or which might be deposed? That is never addressed satisfactorily, as my right honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, said, by the present government. That's their big question. That's the question they're going to have to live with. The next time a large bomb goes off in a western city, how far did this policy contribute to it? The next time some Arab or Muslim state topples and is replaced by extremists, how far did this policy contribute to it? That's why this House should pause, and that's why I shall be supporting today, unless the evidence is produced of a breach and a material threat. That's why today my judgment is we should not go to war until we have more, and that's why I support the Right Honourable Member for Islington North and Finsbury.